Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friendly Circle Berlin. My name is Patrick. We hold workshops every Monday, open to all who are interested. In these workshops, we cover topics of interest to people in recovery from addiction. Every Wednesday and Friday, we hold meetings focused on topics of emotional sobriety. Again, those are open to all who are interested, and we're not affiliated with any specific 12-step fellowship. Today's workshop is with Judith Ragir. Judith is a Dharma teacher in the Zen lineage of Katagiri Roshi. She was instrumental in founding the Clouds of Water Zen Center in St. Paul, Minnesota, where she was the guiding teacher for 9 years and is currently the Senior Dharma Teacher Emeritus. Today we begin at step 1 of a 12-part series which Judith will put on for our group on the 4th Monday of every month for the next 12 months, titled Integrating the 12 Steps and Buddhism. Judith has been using the 12 Steps and Zen Buddhism as the structure of her spiritual life for over 46 years. In this series, she will discuss one step per month for 12 months, exploring what she has called the interweaving of her Zen Buddhist practice with the practice of the 12 Steps. These workshops will last for 90 minutes. Judith will speak for 45 minutes or so. The remainder of the time will be open for Q&A. And if you're watching on YouTube, you'll find more information about Judith and our group in the description below. Please note, we do not post the Q&A on YouTube. You'll have to come along to our live Zooms for those. And so now I'm going to turn it over to you, Judith. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Really appreciate you doing this. Thanks again, Judith.
And I'm very glad to be here. So what I'd like to do at the very beginning is to have a 5-minute, so not very long, meditation for us to arrive. So it won't be long. So those of you who are intimidated or don't like meditation, please know that it'll be very short. And I'll just also say that I don't look at the chat while I'm talking. It's too distracting for me, so I won't see your chat. Okay, so find a way that you would like to sit or lie down just for a few minutes. And the reason I'd like to start this way is for us to really arrive at the meeting, arrive in the moment, arrive in our bodies. So just take a second to notice where you are, where you're sitting, how your body is feeling. Are there tensions in your body? You could invite them to soften or relax. One of the ways I relax is by really connecting to my breathing. So breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. And breathing out, I know I'm breathing out, and I'm really relaxing on my out breath. Letting go on my out breath. Letting in, receiving the nurturing of the world on my in-breath, and letting go on my out-breath. Being with my life exactly the way it is on my in-breath, and finding, if you can, to the extent you're able, trusting the universe, trusting your higher power, trusting the program. If you can find a little bit of trust. And just becoming aware of what you're feeling emotionally. And you name 1 or 2 or 3 feelings, and they can be contradictory. They can be all over the place. But just noting what you're experiencing in your emotional body. And one way I'm able to sit with what I'm feeling is by trying to find a kindness or a gentleness or a softness that can envelop that emotion. It's there, but it doesn't have to be my whole world. I can hold the emotion with awareness, like petting a cat. Calming myself down, accepting what is, but also holding it in a larger perspective. So on the in-breath, can I feel some gentleness or some kindness? And if you don't, that's okay too. Just be kind to not feeling kind. And on the out breath, letting go. So we arrive, letting go of the things that have been bothering us during the day, really entering the meeting so that you're available to what happens in the meeting. And you can like it or you can dislike what happens, but you're available to being here. And the last thing I like to do in a meditation is to make an alignment with my values. So it really depends on your personal intention. They might be staying sober or being centered or working with the serenity prayer. Just find a value or an intention that you can really get behind. This is what you want. And see if you can bring your whole self to be in alignment with that motivation. So that was a 5-minute meditation. Do you notice any changes that happened in you in only 5 minutes? I notice a lot, actually. I'm much more calmer than when I started. And I'm more willing to let go and let this hour and a half flow. So that's step 11 for those of you who are new to the steps. So I've been structuring my life around the 12 steps for 46 years or something like that. I came in 1977. I entered the program first in Overeaters Anonymous. I was a high-end New York City dancer and I was overweight. That's not good. But when I got into OA, they told me I should stop drinking. And that was a whole nother tall order that I wasn't expecting. And in the 70s, there was a strong movement, maybe it still is true, that to get off of all mood altering chemicals. So that was my beginning of program. I still do. I'm still a sober person. That actually has been 46 years of sobriety from drugs and alcohol. Yay. Overeaters Anonymous, I find much harder, although I still do it and work on it. That particular program is like a thermometer, a daily thermometer of how I am doing spiritually. So in a way, the difficulties of that program have been a big gift for me. It's very alive in my daily life. Am I working the steps? Am I turning things over? Or am I trying to suppress what I'm feeling? And now I go to Al-Anon. I'm very involved. I'm mostly now involved in Al-Anon. I go to a meeting every day, a Zoom meeting. After 46 years, you would think I didn't have to go to a meeting every day. But that's the thing. It's a lifelong thing, and I do. And why do I have to? Because I have a wounded, compulsive, defensive nature. This is what I think is the disease of alcoholism. Of course, there's many aspects of the disease. From childhood, I feel like I was wounded. I had several different types of trauma in my childhood, and I didn't learn how to live in relationship, or I didn't learn the standard wholesome ways of living. And I had to start from scratch. And I think that's what step 1 is. Oh my God, I have to start from scratch. And one of the things I like to say about step 1 is this is a program for lost causes. I felt like a lost cause. I felt like I couldn't change. I was no good. Certainly, I couldn't stop eating and doing drugs. I tried and failed for many, many years. And I think that I could have died if I had come to program. And I think many of us are in that position, that because of our inability to stop self-destructive habits, we were close to death or close to suicide or close to an overdose or however it comes into your life, but pretty bad. Now, I say that because the 12-step recovery program is usually directed towards people who have substance abuse. But I also think the 12-step recovery program could be for everyone. You don't have to be a lost cause. And the reason I think that is because the structure of the 12 steps are the way to have a spiritual experience. And somehow the structure of the 12 steps is in all religion. If you deeply enter any spiritual path, you will find the structure of the 12 steps: physical, emotional, and spiritual, self-examination, meditation, and turning your life over or surrendering. So it's both for people who are a lost cause and for regular people who want to change their life or who want to have a spiritual life. So it's both. There's a new American country singer, Jelly Roll. I don't know if any of you have heard it, but he has a song out called Save Me, which is about being a lost cause. And when I heard it on the radio, I just wept in the car. And now I just listened to his album, and it's quite a bit about recovering from drugs and alcohol and jail and all the things that make you feel like you're a lost cause. So the threefold aspect of recovery is physical, emotional, and spiritual. And for me, that's the genius of the program. Certainly, we have to address the physical and chemical realities of our bodies. So I do think there's a chemical, biological component to substance abuse and to overeating, which has something to do with glucose intolerance. And so does alcoholism, for that matter. So I have come to accept after my whole life that I have a chemical indisposition. I have to be careful with what I put in my body because it creates a craving. And of course, the harder drugs are even more so, but even sugar or other types of stimulants, if it affects you chemically, some people it does, some people it doesn't. But if you do, you have to accept that it does. That's one of the aspects of the first step, is accepting that I'm a person who has to watch what she takes in because chemically I'm sensitive in ways that other people are not. And for me, it runs in the family. It's intergenerational sensitivity, and I see it in my parents and my grandparents, and now I see it in my children. So I think there is some evidence for that. So that's physical. Emotional. I think that a lot. So what do they say in the big book? It's a chemical problem. Oh, it's an allergy with a mental obsession. So yes, indeed. So the emotional part is learning for me how to be emotionally stable. You know, I'll take question and answer when I'm done. Otherwise, it's distracting for me. Let's see, what was I saying? See, I got distracted. Emotional. So that's steps 4 through 9 in our world, in the 12-step world. And it's very, very important, I have found, to go back into my life and to deeply understand the causes of my suffering and the causes of my emotional stress. And that's what I did in the book that I wrote, Untangling Karma. It's very much about me entering into the aspects of my life that I'm afraid of, that I didn't want to show anybody, and really going in there and looking at it, self-examination, looking at it, seeing what the positives were, what the negatives were, and making amends to people I had hurt. And that includes myself. And that aspect of the program is really where the rubber hits the road, I think. And what I found from Zen is in a lot of the religions, that particular aspect is missing. Steps 4 through 9 are missing, or they're talked about, but they're not really delved into. And this is where 12-step has really saved my ass, if you don't mind me saying that. Because you can't get through the 12-step program without someone being in your face that you have to do steps 4 through 9, or you're not going to get the freedom that you are hoping for. So that's a really important and wonderful part of our structure. And the last part is spiritual. So basically, program is a spiritual program. How to have a spiritual change in your life so that you feel self-love, to put it really mild, frankly. You feel that you're a worthy person. You feel that the light of the universe is in you and without you, that there's no need to be defensive, and that you can learn a different way of living that is not based on self-centeredness. And the delusion, A, that we're in control, and B, that we get what we want. That's a delusion that needs to be cracked in order to find your footing in a spiritual life. Oh, the sun is coming in. Let me see if I move over a little bit. So physical, spiritual, and emotional. So the first step starts with we. Now, I ignored that for probably 30 years because I'm really stubborn, because I'm very self-reliant. So I think if you have trauma in your childhood, you learn how to do it by yourself, she says angrily. There was nobody there to help me. So I learned by hook or by crook, by any means possible, how to survive. And I did it by myself. So I took that into the program. That was my attitude, that I could do this through willpower, and I could do it through knowledge, and I could do it by myself. And now, after all these years, I know that that's a delusion, that that's not true. And it starts with the we. Because I'm a lost cause, I can't do this by myself. If I could have done it by myself, I would have. But my life was so screwed up that there was no way I could say I'm doing good. So I have had over the years, and as I'm saying, this took me a long time to understand that I am not alone. And this is a big Buddhist concept, of course, that we're interrelated or we're interdependent, and that what I do affects you and what you do affects me, and that there is no separate self. So that's an enormous concept. It took me decades to understand it in Buddhism. And then I started to understand it in 12 steps. And that's one of the reasons I still go to a meeting every day. I need to be reminded. Some people say I need to take my medicine. I need to be reminded on a daily basis that I'm not in control, that I can't do this by myself, and that I can trust something larger than me, my, and mine. And I have to learn that over and over and over. And community, I think, is going to be the kind of the healing or the salvation for the 21st century, is if we can really, really understand how to live in community, how to love each other and help each other wholesomely, not like I used to do. This I'm getting from Al-Anon. I used to think, well, you help someone, you go in there, you tell them what to do, and you get mad at them if they don't do what you say. And I learned that from my kids, saying, that was terrible, Mom. That was a terrible way of parenting. And now I know that it was. But there's a lot of ways of living in community and sharing our strength that will actually help all of us move towards a better way of life. I'm trying to remember the first step now. We admitted that we were powerless over our substance. So let's talk about powerlessness. It's just the most wonderful, wonderful thing for me, is to contemplate what powerlessness means. And it's complicated because it's a paradox, I would say. Because in the one way, we are totally and absolutely powerless, and at the end of our life, we're going to die. On the other hand, we are responsible for our actions. And this is cause and effect in Buddhism, that the seeds we plant, we will reap in this lifetime or our next lifetime. It's not totally linear. It's not totally one-to-one. But what is a wholesome practice is accepting the pain that was created by the past in this moment, and then choosing to plant a good seed for our future. And so there is a measure of choice in the moment. So is it powerlessness? And how does that handle? How do we hold choice? Oh, and that's the serenity prayer, right? Give me the wisdom to know, can I change this or not? And the other thing is, over the years, 45 years, there's been some feminist movements that say, oh, it's not good for women to say they're powerless because we've been in a position of powerlessness. And perhaps that's true for all marginalized people. So let's be subtle and sophisticated about what powerlessness means. So certainly, if we have an allergy, if we have a chemical reaction, that is powerlessness. And we have to admit that, and we have to choose to not do that thing. So there is kind of a toughness to the program, which is making the right choice, and certainly making the right choice about your substance. But even there, this might be heretical, but even there, I want to choose to love and be kind to myself when I don't choose right. Because we're human, because we make mistakes, because of recovery is filled with a lot of back steps. So even if I choose in a self-destructive way, I can still be kind and forgive myself and get back on the horse and try again. But there is, spiritually speaking, there's a real importance to powerlessness. To really saying, I'm not in charge. There's a wonderful thing in the big book about the puppets that we want to be the puppeteer and get everybody to do what we want them to do and get ourselves to do what we want to do. And we want to be God, basically. And now the surrender for me is every single day saying, I am not in charge. And I don't have to be afraid of that, because essentially, this is spiritually speaking, essentially the universe is benevolent. It is taking care of me. I am a part of the interdependence of all things, and I can trust my life, essentially. Now, when you first get into program, you can't trust your frontal lobe, right? You have to check things out with everybody, because the frontal lobe is just filled with compulsion. But if you've been in program for a while, if you've been sober for a while, or abstinent, or whatever words you want to use, I think it's very important to begin to trust your intuition. And in the beginning, you should check it out with other people, your sponsor, your therapist. Do you think this is cuckoo, magical thinking, or is this my intuition letting me know, deep listening as to where I should go next? So, just to repeat, existentially, we are not in control of anything, really. And then, relatively speaking, we do have moments of choice, and we're responsible for those moments of choice, like the Serenity Prayer tells us. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. So I think I talked about the unmanageable part. And I talked about powerlessness. So in order for me to make good choices in my life, I have to feel connected. I have to feel connected. So I don't know, we'll be talking as the steps go on as to what is a non-theistic God. So there's a lot of problems at 12 steps for Buddhists, because the language of the 12 steps are Christian, Judeo-Christian language. So I've become like a translator robot. The Christian language goes in and I come out with Buddhist language. But nevertheless, it makes it a little bit harder to understand how to do the steps. And that's why I'm doing this, because if you're non-theistic, that means you don't think there's a man in the sky who's taking care of everything. If you're more into spirit or universal energy or nature or the truth or even science, how do you do the steps? You know, when they say, when they use the word heat for starters. So that's one thing we're going to be working on, is the interpretation of the steps from a non-theistic point of view. So in order to have clarity of mind, in order to feel centered, in order to be able to trust your intuition, to listen deeply to yourself, I believe that you have to have a connection with something larger than yourself. So that could be in the beginning, or maybe always, the group. It could be conscious contact that you feel through prayer and meditation. It could be another way I learned trust is I take a risk, like I'm doing the steps and I say, okay, I'm going to risk making an amend to that person. And then I make the amend and something good comes out of it. Not something terrible like I thought. I think part of this compulsion and woundedness is always projecting that the worst is going to happen. But I'm trying to pivot that in my mind, that if I'm connected with universal energy, if I'm deeply listening to myself, if I've checked it out with someone so it's not magical thinking, I can make choices. And if I have a strong enough mindfulness practice, which means I'm pretty clear-headed, I'm not just racing around in my head, so I'm not present. So if I'm pretty present, if I'm connected, I can make a choice. And sometimes I can't, because I essentially have a disease of compulsion and selfishness. And when I make choices coming out of that, then it usually turns out negative. I have to stop. I have to do repair work. I have to heal myself again and start over. But that's the process over and over. Failure is part of the process. And you learn, hopefully, you learn from your mistakes. So I'm going to end talking with, I think the most important thing for me, and it comes through my spirit, is just learning to love myself. Even saying it out loud kind of makes me cry. I lived with so much shame and unhealed trauma, not only from my personal life, but also from ethnic, being a Jew from World War II. There was just so much shame and self-hatred. And that, my dear, sweet friend, has to get cleared up. And the way you clear it up is steps 4 through 9, and really learning to have a spiritual life, to be connected with goodness. My own goodness, that I'm a good person, that I have God or the light or the spirit is running through me, without me. Sometimes I call it an omniscient power, because in Buddhism, you don't really think it's a higher power. It's higher, lower, inside, outside. It's just the world's vitality and the universe. They call it total dynamic functioning. That's the greatest label for God that I have found in Buddhism, is total dynamic functioning. And the other phrase is the whole, WHOLE, the whole work. So if I have turned it over, if I have surrendered to that, one day at a time, one moment at a time, I begin to walk towards healing and get the promises of the program. And I'll just end with, we don't have to be perfect. That's part of our compulsion. Perfectionism is the near enemy of spiritual growth, of enlightenment, I say in Buddhist circles. 80% is great. If you're recovering 80%, let's rejoice. It's not going to be 100%, because you're a human being, and human beings have foibles. Our desire for our selfishness is very, very strong. So we just work one day at a time, every day for your whole life, to surrender that part of yourself and listen, deeply listen for what is the next right thing to do. that is wholesome and will benefit yourself and other people. I think I talked about step 1. We admitted we were powerless over our substance and that our life had become unmanageable. That's the most humble, down on my knees, I can't do this by myself. I don't even know if I can do it with the help of other people. And that's where we start.